Hey folks, my name is Ravish and welcome back to another video in the series of DevOps interviews. Now, we have a profile with us today. So this person has started his career around 8 to 9 years back, close to 4 to 5 years of experience in Terraform, writing scripts. This interview was quite long, so I took an excerpt. It's close to like 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes of interview on Terraform itself. And the person started his career as a dev, and in this interview we have started asking question from the very basic, and then we went to the advanced question on Terraform. So take a look at this interview, write down all the questions, because that would be very much beneficial for you in your future interviews related to DevOps and Terraform. So before moving further, kindly subscribe the channel because that really helps me to grow. And without further ado, let's get started.
So you create an infrastructure using Terraform, right? Or something else?
Yes.
Terraform.
No, primarily Terraform. I worked with CloudFormation, tried a little bit Pulumi as well, but primarily Terraform.
Pulumi is also painful stuff. And start Pulumi, then it will take its own sweet time to start. And if it gets stopped in between, the IP gets in, there are a lot of things with Pulumi. Okay, no problem. So let's talk about Terraform, and I think this would be my last topic for today's conversation. How does it differ from other infrastructure as a tool like CloudFormation, Pulumi, and why? What is your experience on that?
So it has so first of all, it has basically it has a lot of providers, right? So you can automate a lot of stuff like including Cloudflare, GitHub, a lot of stuff you can do using Terraform. I'm not sure very much whether like Pulumi also has it's whether it is that mature or whether it has a lot of providers or not. But certainly CloudFormation is a cloud specific IAC tool, and CDK is also there again, which is
AWS CDK,
AWS CDK, which is again cloud space. I hope it is cloud. I have not worked on AWS CDK, but is that also having a lot of providers or no? Only AWS?
You can use your code in that. I'm not a lot of working experience. My junior was working on it, so he told me about it. But close to like you can write your own code. It's good. People who come from a development background tend to pick it, but I personally prefer Terraform.
Right. So and how other factors? So CloudFormation, like it's a CloudFormation is primarily like you need to. If I compare primarily from the CloudFormation, you need to basically click on the you need to deploy that file, right, in the AWS environment, which is not particularly from the GitOps principles, right? That you cannot completely create a CI/CD pipeline around it. Maybe there are ways, but I have not tried that. It was a little earlier. But again, you need to put the parameters there manually, need to check. While in Terraform, you can completely automate that, create a CI/CD pipeline, and then manage the variables. You can use the workspaces. That is one of the good features there in Terraform, that you can completely manage your duplicate. Like if that code environment is completely replicated, then you can easily use the workspace to manage those environments, right? So these are the benefits of Terraform. Yeah.
Okay, so whenever we create any infrastructure, we start writing the Terraform file, and then we use resource in that, right? So what is a Terraform resource, and how do you define it in the configuration file?
So resource, the basic object is resource only. Like you need to do, there are two types, right? Resource and data, and then you create modules out of it, right? So generally we go about creating the modules for, let's say, all the components that we create, be it the network or the EKS cluster or RDS. So resource is primarily you go about resource and then put the resource type and then define the name and then put the configuration inside that. And if you're putting it via module, then create a couple of resources in a folder and then call it like refer as a source. Then it will refer as a module, or you can put it in a separate repo, put a GitHub link there, define a version branch, right, tag version. So all that stuff we can do. And yeah, earlier when I started my journey, so count. I think this for each feature was not there in 2016, somewhere around that, 15, 16, 17. And then it was very painful, like managing that module part. Now it is, I think, those limitations have been removed. So I'm working on Terraform from last at least 7 years, 7 years.
Okay.
And I have managed complex environment, like I have managed the complete CI/CD pipeline for a company, fintech company. It was an EC2 based deployment, so completely managed via Terraform, immutable infrastructure, where we used to build the image and then completely deploy it via Terraform, via CI/CD pipeline. So I have managed quite complex environments as well using Terraform with a blue-green deployment. That was a blue-green deployment where we used to switch the traffic using the load balancer, listener kind of a module. So it was a little complex, but yeah, it's good.
Okay. So whenever we have access keys and passwords in Terraform, how would you manage them?
So password primarily, let's say you are creating a database, right? So you need to let's say you are creating a random string, right? So you need to put a sensitive equals to true. Then it will not. It will basically encrypt that, and then when you make it false, then only it will show you in the output. Right? Otherwise, it puts you there as sensitive. So that is how basically right now we manage it. Mostly we generally need a database password, not anything else. If we are creating a RDS, so let's say we are putting a root user, and for that we need to define a password. So that is how I manage the secrets.
Have you ever used these data sources to retrieve sensitive information from any external system?
Data source like data, and then you fetch the existing
fetch the information from any external system. Have you ever tried?
Like for example, you mean data, and then let's say I want to fetch the VPC ID, right? So let's say data, then AWS VPC, and then define the name of filter, and then it will give you the VPC ID. That is what you are talking about, right?
Yeah, but it's related more to the question which I just asked. Like, if you have a secret manager, if you have a parameter store, have you ever pulled information using data sources from these kind of
external systems? That approach. So for example, let's say I was deploying Kong. So when we were deploying Kong, so while the server boots up, I did that in EC2 environment. So when the server boots up, we fetch the data or secret from the AWS. When we create it, we put it in the secret store, and secrets manager and secret store, like a couple of things in secret store and manager. And then in the script we call it, like we give the access of the AWS access to those particular secrets in the EC2 instance, and then fetch it on the runtime to provision or set up the Kong cluster, Kong server. But particularly for managing this password, so let's say I'm just curious to understand that use case I did not do that you are mentioning, but otherwise I have done it. But let's say we need to create a password, right, for the database. So let's say let's say I say that okay, create a random string and create a secret like in the secret manager, put this secret. But that password is still there in the random string, right? How do you go about managing that part? How do you avoid that?
I'm sorry, I lost the conversation. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'm saying, to answer your question, to manage the secrets, primarily, let's say a database password, I was using this sensitive equals to true to encrypt that or do not show it. But as you're saying, fetch it from the maybe parameter store, right, and then use it. I think we can, like you are saying, put the secrets in, create a secret manually in the parameter store, right, and then fetch the data, and then basically use that to define it in the while you are creating the RDS. But maybe again in that case you need to create the secret manually, right? You cannot do it via Terraform then.
I'll give you a gist of the problem statement that I have worked on. I mean, we can have multiple experiences, but the scenario I've worked on. So there was a sensitive information that has to be passed and used in the infrastructure. So the thing I use input variables and the data sources. I mean, there can be multiple ways. I knew about that at that time. So input variable and data sources. So this input variable will allow to pass the sensitive data externally, such as through environment variables, and we have a file known as tfvars file, right? So there is a separate tfvars file, and these data sources can be used to retrieve sensitive information from external system, the one I was talking about, secret management parameters. So this was the scenario that I was working on. So I thought maybe you had a similar experience like that, so wanted to talk about
No,
that.
I had that. I had that. Yeah, TFVARs also we use. And then basically the environment variable also we use in couple of, let's say, I was, if I remember correctly, I was deploying something with respect to Sumo logic, and then its access key secret key was supposed to be put there, and we defined that in the environment variable, and it was picking it from there. Yeah. So I have used both the cases. Yeah.
Okay. So
But again, on the same thing, like just one last thing. Let's say if we are putting the secret manager part, I think we can do that. We can fetch it on the runtime and then put it. But again, we need to somehow, if we are creating the secret manager manually, then I think it is making sense to me. If we are doing that also via Terraform, then I think it is a little tricky, right? Because anyway, you need to put some random string.
Never worked on that
pass
scenario.
it from the external.
Yeah. Never worked on that
Maybe
scenario.
pass it as an environment variable or external TFS. But somewhere or the other, you need to define that. Like some manual process is required, right? If you want to do it completely manual, I think we need to think through how we can do that. But partially manual step required.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Okay. So in Terraform, we hear a lot about this state file and stuff, right? How do you maintain the state file and this and that? I'll get to the root of it. So what exactly is this state, and why is it important?
So basically, state file, whenever you create an infrastructure, it creates the metadata, or you can say the reference, right? So let's say if you are creating a, let's say, security group, right? So it will create a JSON file and then put a reference to what resource it has created in the JSON format. So Terraform keep a track of what it is doing in terms of the JSON file, so that it can sync the state, or it can relate to that state, okay, whether this object or this resource has changed or not, and then show you the drift, right? So that is how maybe I'm not sure whether I'm using the right word or not, but this is how the basic principle behind the state file, right? So whatever resource you create, you put it in the JSON, it tracks via JSON file and then matches when you are running the Terraform next time.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you create, modify or delete, it will take care of everything. Okay. So you were talking about the infrastructure that you created for fintech, I guess, right? You were talking about. So was there only one environment, or everything like development, staging, or production environment?
All
of
three.
them. So how are you managing them?
Staging via Terraform, like module based, and then pass the different variables.tf file. Like for example, let's say Terraform variables, Terraform.tf file for different environments. So let's say you created the module, common modules where let's say a EKS cluster is being created, and then you call those let's say a main.tf, right? So you created let's say dev folder, test folder, dev, staging, and production folder. It can be done via workspace as well, but let's say we are doing it via different folders. And then in that folder, we are creating a .tf file, and we are calling that module and defining the variables according to that. And that is how we can call those modules and create the infrastructure. So basically, what we did, we created a very big module for a particular infrastructure. Let's say we put the load balancer, we put the security group, launch template, everything in a particular module, and then call that module in a respective environment folder, and then basically pass the variables from there, and then apply it.
Okay, so I'll just try to understand it spatially. So you had a parent module in which you had the specification of creating some infrastructure. Okay, let's say EC2 instance. and now you might be having child modules through which you are making a call to this. But how are you passing the like? How does it differs in terms of dev stage and prod? How does it know that I have to spin a dev environment or a stage or a production environment? How does it know?
So there are two ways. One is I was creating a different folder for dev, for stage or prod, right? And that in that particular folder, let's say dev folder, I am creating a main.tf where I am calling that particular module and then passing the variables like the tf variables file.
Okay,
right?
so every environment has a different folder. Every environment has a different folder. Acha, okay, cool.
Right.
Okay, but you could have used workspaces, right? I mean, they are separate state files.
That is what I'm saying. Right. So sometimes what happens, senior people don't, like they see that, okay, workspace, if somebody forget to, it depends on the maturity, right? So, so my manager, he was really good at that, but I put that, okay, we are completely replicating the environment, so we can go for workspace. So he said, no, junior DevOps might make some mistake, production delete ho jayega, and etc. So
got it. I mean, sometimes you see that, okay, I might be in some other workspace and I might have to change it. People forget, do changes and stuff. It's quite common. Okay. So consider a scenario. I mean, this happens a lot. It's happened with me, the real-time scenario kind of a thing. So let's say you are a senior DevOps guy and there are two DevOps guys under you. Okay. So you are working as a team on a Terraform project. There is a high chance of a conflict. How do you collaborate in that term? Did you get my question?
Yeah. So I understand. Like let's say you are saying that, okay, three DevOps are working. They are working on the same module. They are working on same let's say dev environment, right? How do you go about collaborate? So how do we? I faced a similar issue. So what we created there was one pipeline where it was in Bitbucket. So we created a Bitbucket pipeline for deploying the Terraform, and then multiple people were working. So as per our structure, we decide that, okay, let's say there were multiple modules. For example, let's say it was not big one module, it was multiple modules. For example, let's say VPC, RDS, etc. And so let's say we decided that, okay, at one time, as per the organization structure, one DevOps will not be working on, let's say, this module. So we put the target part in the pipeline itself. We need to pass the custom, like that, we did the hyphen target and then pass the module name, module dot, let's say, EKS, right? If I'm working on EKS on the pipeline, that is mandatory. So one time DevOps can only apply one particular target he's working on or module he's working on. So that is how we try to optimize that, because let's say, because for one environment state file is same, right? So even if you create different branches, obviously you should create different branches, but how do you go about not impacting others' work? And that we try to sort out by applying the changes through Bitbucket pipeline only for a particular module. So that is how we try to reduce and try to manage it. Did I answer the question or you?
Yeah. Okay. So when I talk about Terraform, okay, resources have dependencies. Okay, I think in AWS there is when we use CloudFormation, there is a concept of cyclomatic complexity or something like that. Cyclic complexity, something like that. So in case of Terraform, how does this Terraform handle dependencies between the resources?
So basically you define the depends on parameter whenever you are creating resources or modules. So it does it automatically if you don't define it. But if you think that, okay, there is a hard dependency, so you should, let's say, if I'm creating a EKS and it is dependent on security group or VPC, right? So obviously I should say for EKS I would put depends on module.vpc, right? So that it first create the VPC module, then try for the EKS module. So that is how basically the dependency works. And then if you so there is a cycler dependency. If you let's say just an example, you say there are two modules. You say, okay, A is depends on B and B depends on A. So then it will Terraform will say that, okay, there is a cycler dependency, so it will change.
Okay. I think this would be my last question for today.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, this is a debatable question. I mean, you can have different views on that. Okay, do you think Terraform is actually platform agnostic? I mean, it is being sold to people by saying Terraform is platform agnostic. What are your views on it?
No, I don't think, right? So if you are writing let's say EC2, let's say you are creating a server, right? So it would be a different code in for AWS and different code for GCP and Azure, right? So I don't think that is cloud agnostic.
Yeah, same feeling. I mean, topic is debatable, obviously. A lot of people say that platform agnostic. Even I feel the same. I mean, if you are going to some other cloud, GCP, I mean, I think you can create on-prem system from Terraform. Heard about it, never did it. You have to change the code, right? So what's the point of calling it platform agnostic? I mean, topic is debatable.
For example, let's say, for example, in case of help chat, right? So you deploy it anywhere, so that is platform agnostic.
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
makes sense.
true.
But in case of Terraform, you need to change the code, and there's no point of. And that is maybe a side of the bad part of it. Maybe ideally something like maybe just you need to define the parameter, okay, AWS, GCP, and then it changes, right? So, or maybe you define how you are connecting to the cloud, and it automatically works. You just change the provider, and then it should work ideally. So something like that should be there, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an amazing tool. I personally love it, but if I say like this, it can raise a lot of eyebrows, which is fine. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm done.